Good morning. The only thing that we know about the future is that it's going to be different. The only thing that is constant is change. We are just so delighted that you are here today for our 47th annual J. Walter Porter Forum, Business and the Current Economy, Trends and Outlook for the Future. This forum is made possible through the generous donation of the late J. Walter Porter's family and friends. Mr. Porter was interested in improving the image of business as a career field for college students. By using this venue, we are able to link our students, our faculty, and the business community with successful business executives. They are here to share their expertise and their knowledge in their fields, and we are so fortunate to have them here today to provide that link between our classroom theory and the real world that we're experiencing today. Today, I would also like to welcome some of the Porter family members. We have Bill and Liesl Porter here from Dallas, and we also have Jimmy Porter here joining us today. Thank you. We're also so glad that our students and our faculty, as well as business leaders, could be with us here today. Next, I would like to introduce Dr. Lisa Abney, who is the provost for Northwestern, and she's going to share a welcome with you as well. Dr. Abney?
We have to get hooked up. Yeah. Get all hooked up here so that we can hear on the recording. I just want to take a moment to thank you all for coming today. It's so important to us that we have the input of our businesses, our local businesses, and all their management staffs as we work on developing programs at the university. We have found over the years that really to make sure that our students are ready to go out in the business world, that it's just imperative that we have your assistance, and we have the opportunity to hear what's going on in the business world to make sure that our students are ready when they come out. So we thank you for sharing your time. We know that you are busy people and that you don't have a lot of time to give to things like this, so we are very grateful that you can be with us. Our students have told us again and again how much these forums mean to them, because they get the experience of hearing you, visiting with you at the break. It's really a wonderful time for them. So we appreciate you. We look forward to working with you in the future, and please know that we will be in contact as we start looking at some new degree programs. If you have some ideas about things that you think Northwestern needs to get into, niche markets that for education, let us know, because we're happy to work with you and see if we can develop some of these things. So again, welcome. We look forward to visiting with you more at the break. Thank you. Thank you.
We have three great speakers today. So now I would like for Ms. Sarah Wright to come up and introduce our first speaker. Ms. Wright.
Well, good morning. It's my honor to introduce our first speaker. He is a native of Manno, Louisiana, a true entrepreneur with varied business interests. He served as chairman of the board for People's State Bank for 28 years and is continuing to serve on the board of directors after a merger with MidSouth Bank of Lafayette. He is a respected member of his community in which he proudly serves, Mr. Pete Abington.
Let me get hooked up here. Show me what to do.
Just flip it.
Paint it on?
Just flip it on. Yeah.
Like that?
Yep.
All right.
You're great.
I'm in business. All right. Wow. If you had ever told me over 50 years ago I'd be addressing a business class at a university, I'd have said, you a baboon. I never thought I'd be on this end of the podium, okay? If I would have been one of you, I'd have been sitting back there in the back, and somebody had to keep punching me every once in a while to stay tuned. We're talking college work now. We're not talking about foolishness. And that was kind of where I was. but I always had ambition. I can tell you that. And I always had a plan, I thought, but I didn't know how it was going to work, but you have to stay focused. But I am very honored to be here today, to be talking with you, to be asking me for something in my life that might help you. And I hope it does work out that way. Of course, I can tell you this much, nothing works if you don't have a good family. And I'm really honored today to have my family here with me. Some of them couldn't be here, but I want to introduce them. This is my son, Doug Abington, right over here. This is my wife, Ellen Abington, sitting right back here. I got an old brother-in-law here, Curlin Sutton. He's from Natchitoches. His Caspery. He's a great-great-grandson of Colonel Caspery. And this new building you have here at Northwestern a few weeks ago that was dedicated, that was his great-great-grandfather. But he means a lot to us as a graduate of Northwestern. His wife, Margaret Sutton. She's in everything around Natchitoches that needs to be into, but she's a graduate of Northwestern. And then her son, Mark Sutton, has Sutton Real Estate Agency here in Natchitoches. He's, you'll see his name all over town. He's very active in business, does a good job. I'm proud to see, I just ran into the, the restroom, Troy Hebert with MidSouth, he's here. And J.J. Blake and Lewis McBride, all back there with MidSouth Bank. We're proud to have each one of those friends here and family. But you know, I think about all I can say about me is my whole life kind of been by the seat of my britches. I really didn't have a plan. I really didn't have it all worked out. I was going to be inheriting a business, and this is what I'm supposed to do. I just knew I wanted to make some money and try to be a success. And I think that's what I'm supposed to tell y'all today, a little bit of what worked in my life. No magic, just determination, but you got to stay focused, and you got to stay focused on what you want out of life. Remember what I said, by the seat of my britches. My life probably hadn't really moved on too much because I still operate out of the first front bedroom of my house. I was born and raised in Manno, Louisiana. The house I was born in is right where my office is today. And my front bedroom, which I acquired that from my family, is where my office is, and I use the house for all kinds of things. And you got to stay involved with your community, and you got to always give back. We use that house now for Sunday school on Sunday. We use it to feed a bunch of people from periodically, and people come in and out here. My mother and daddy ever known I was using that house for the things they're using it for, they would have sure been surprised. Then one time it was a loan company, and I know my daddy would have been interested in that. but anyway, my boyhood home is where my office is today. So I guess you say I really hadn't moved on too much. But I was a typical dreamer, and I just always dreamed, and I was always very impressionable. The guy downtown who had a little tale to tell, he'd just tell old Pete, boy, I'd get fired at him. I'd take off up the street to my mother and tell her, or my boss, wherever I worked. I had all kind of part-time jobs, and good Lord, I was a person to be turned on to by a coach, because they could fire me up. By the time they get through working on me, I'd run through the wall if they wanted me to. If the coach said that was different, you just got to go do it. But that's kind of the way it is in life. Listen to your boss and do what they say. My mother and daddy, I owe a lot to them. They were two different people in a lot of ways. I'll give you a good example. My mother was very kind, peace on earth, goodwill to men. She was a seamstress. She was very smart. But let's keep peace on earth. My daddy believed in hard work and standing up and saying your piece. A good example, in front of my house one time I had an alteration with a guy, and we just went up and down that street carrying on. And so then I go in the house, and Mom and Daddy was there at the door. What? Mama said, son, what's going on out here carrying on like this in the front yard? I said, well, this guy, he made me mad. Daddy said, go out and finish the job. So I had those kind of personalities kind of working on me through life. But through all that, it gave me a lot of drive, and I learned to stand up for myself. Played all sports, Manny, enjoyed all of them. If they'd let me stay in high school, I'd have probably done it. We played football, we get through, we just change uniform and put on the basketball suit. And then we get through with that, we put on the baseball suit, track suit, just whatever it would take to make the community go. Enjoyed it, but I finally got too old and they made me leave. But, but when I got to college, I was about as confused as you could say. But I still said, I want to make money and I want to be a success. I always liked Northwestern. Matter of fact, one of my nicknames in high school, I talked about Northwestern so much, was Demon. But anyway, everybody convinced me, no, you got to get away from home. Well, I said, all right, I'll go to LSU. Well, when I got the price tag on LSU, I couldn't swing it right then. So I had this friend over here, it's your cousin, Mary Beth, said, come on up to Tech. Tech, God, I hated Tech. You know, we were raised to dislike Tech. And, but yeah, okay, come on up to Tech. And, well, I didn't know a soul there. He didn't know anybody. And he said, well, you can stay there a couple of years, then you can transfer. Oh, you can do that? Yeah, we can do that. So I go up there. Margaret takes me up there, and the president was from Natchitoches, Dr. Rock. He said, you can come up here for $500 a year. That isn't true, but that's what he said. But anyway, so that's where I went, and didn't know a soul. Got up there, and well, you got to know somebody. I don't know a soul. Well, how we going to meet people? So I told Jim Bob, I said, I tell you what I'm going to do. So I'm going to run for vice president's freshman class. Well, you don't know anybody. I said, yeah, but I can meet some people. Well, that was the first time I ever realized there's dissension in the crowd, in the state. And I got in that race for Manny, knowing not a soul knew me, but nobody had anything against me. And that's where you can come out sometime in the winter. Well, nobody in Shreveport wanted anybody from Monroe to be a success. I found that out. And they just set up their road barriers against each other, and they all lit on the old boy here from Manny. So I won the race, but I met a lot of people, and I kind of got started. Well, that's what you got to do. You got to keep asking for it, and you got to stay out there. But my problem, I wanted too much. And so how you be a success? I said, well, people I know in Manny, they're doctors, they're lawyers. So I said, okay, that's what I'll do. So I went through that line that day, and I signed up for everything. And to be a doctor or a lawyer. Well, I found out pretty quick I didn't need to do that again. I also found out I met my old nemesis, algebra. I took, and I never had to understand why you take algebra. But anyway, I took that, and the professor said, you know, boys, y'all gonna have to be back next semester. I said, I had never heard of trigonometry. No, that kind of mess. So we endured it. You couldn't drop out. We endured it, and sure enough, I went back the next semester and I made an A. But sure spent a lot of time on it. I never have found out exactly why I needed to hunt X. But again, by the seat of my britches. But you got to stay focused on life, and you got to stay dedicated. But I've always been very, very active. I cruised along there in college, realized where I needed to be was business, so I got in business, got my degree in business. But I was just about to have to leave college because it would cost. So my daddy was putting the heat on me, so I know what I'll do. I'll run for president student body. So that job pays. They pay you $2 with every one of these rings you sell. We sold them for $39.50, and that went with the president. And I was the only one that could sell them. So if you wanted to graduate and have a diploma, you had to come by me. And he liked that. You know, I don't think I ever did pay Uncle Sam for that. But anyway, I made my $2 a ring. They cost $39.50, and I want to say this to you: when you try to buy a senior ring from Northwestern, they don't cost $39.50 anymore. About $500, the best I know. But that was the deal. And so anyway, I graduated, and I certainly finished there by the seat of my britches. Never met a stranger. Again, by the seat of my britches. I had to find a job. Didn't know what to do. Went to Dallas. I bet I saw the first oscillating door I've ever seen. This guy was trying to hire me. I stepped all over his heels, and that thing that went around. Never saw one of those before. And I didn't get the job. Wound up in New Orleans, went to work for the American Oil Company. And they sent me through a training program. I thought it was the greatest program on earth. Went back and told everybody again. I've always been very fired up, and you could impress on me real quick, and I'll get into it, and sent a bunch of my other buddies down there to get hired. But they sent me to a territory to run service stations after about 7 months and sell their products. I went to Alabama, and that was a low point for me because I didn't know a soul. And that's hard to do, to leave Louisiana. It was for me. You pick up the sports page, I didn't care anything about reading about the University of Alabama or anything else, and that was back before they even had a good football team. That was the second year Bear Bryant was there. And of course, they'd always brag on him, but I'd always think, yeah, they trying to look like LSU. But anyway, I stayed up there and tried to find something to do. I even saw an ad in the paper one day where they were advertising to come out and try out for a semi-pro football team. So I thought, well, I'll try that. I like sports. And I went over there and got me a contract. But they only paid $1 a minute. And they gave you $10 to get to the game. But I met a lot of good guys. And guys that were in the NFL that there wasn't enough money in that job to go back. They just stay there because if you worked there and you played for the Vulcans, they'd get you a job. And they were better off just to stay there and make $60 a game. But it was a great experience. But I knew one thing, at the end of that year, I needed to get out of that state. And I just came back. But before I left, I had a guy lived next door to me. He told me about a product they had just invented called second mortgage loans. Nobody in the United States could make a second mortgage loan at that time. So I came back to Louisiana. This lady that Margaret and I knew since we were kids lived at our house one time. She had a rooming house in Shreveport, and she let me move in her rooming house. And I became the second person in the whole city that could make second mortgage loans. No banks did it, no finance companies did it, nothing. And I thought I was the greatest person on this earth. Didn't know a damn thing about what I was doing, but I was there. And when I got there, I said I got to have a briefcase. So I had a little old briefcase I'd won from selling the wax in it. It was made out of cardboard. And my cousin sent me to a lawyer there, and I said, I want to go in the mortgage loan business. But my job was, if you wanted to borrow some money on your house, then I could find somebody that would loan the money on your house, and I'd make me a little commission. That was the deal. But that got me in the world of finance. And that's when I first got an idea it'd be nice to own a bank. But that was such a far-fetched idea for me, but I never lost sight, and for years and years, I talked to people about that. But I'll tell you more about it in a minute. But I always remember being in that rooming house, and people would see my big ad in the paper, and they would call me. So they wouldn't know I didn't have an office. I'd say, I give home service. You don't have to come to my office. Oh, you do? Yeah. So, boy, I'd take off to their house. And then eventually one day I did a loan. The guy offered me some office space downtown. And that's kind of the way I existed. But it gave me a whole lot of a new look at life. And I found out that algebra began to make sense to me when you put $1 in front of it. And finance was dealing with dollars. Again, remember what I said, I was running by the seat of my britches. I'd follow people around there at night in that business and wait till they went to the restroom and ask them a little bit about having a mortgage loan company, a little bit about the business, and they might tell me something, and I wouldn't forget it. And then for that, and of course I remember the name, and then the next day I'd say, hey Frank, hey Miss John, you know, and I learned the business that way. But then one day I met a fellow named Bill Hanna. Billy had Bill Hanna Ford in Shreveport. And he and I got to know, I bought a car from him. He and I got to know each other, and he realized he was impressed what I knew about finance. from the very first day. And he began to tell me about a new product called leasing of cars. That's right. Y'all take that for granted. But that was nothing like it right then. And no telling what's going to come as you folks get out of college. And he said, if you'll come to work for me, and I'll give you options in my leasing company. You will? Yeah. Well, I had capital if I do that. I said, well, you got to pay me. He paid me a good salary. And then I had to sell cars. He had a little finance company he wanted me to run. And I said, I don't care how many hours I work, I'll come there. And so I took off in that leasing business. I thought I had the finest job in this world. And in the manual, and you got to remember this, if you don't ask for it, you're not going to get it. And it said you got to prospect. I don't care what you do in your life, you got to ask for the business. My son right now is in commercial real estate in Shreveport. Mark's a very, very, very successful business here in this town. You got to tell that customer, I want the business. Ain't nobody going to fault you for that. Well, that's what I started doing, and I started prospecting. Just walk up to people, and I knew that if I'd call on 20 people a day, 20 people a week, I might get no, but I knew I'd have a good month 2 months later. And sure enough, people would think something would come up, and they might need a car, and they would call me. And one guy right here from Natchitoches, Dick Gerlach, I don't know if you remember him, he told me one day he built a great big meat packing company. He said, I ain't never had nobody come by and ask me about buying a car. I said, well, that's me. And I wound up selling him 12, 15 automobiles. But you got to learn to prospect, and I kept pumping that leasing. One day I had an opportunity to come by, and you got to have drive and determination. Some guy from up there was proud, big talking old guy. His son-in-law come home for Christmas, and he wanted to bring him down and introduce him around. And that son-in-law was a purchasing agent for Tenneco Oil. Tenneco Oil at that time was national oil company, had service stations everywhere. They were the first big oil company that came along and cut the price on gasoline, kind of like Raceway is here. And he said, leasing, we ought to do it in leasing. I said, yeah, you sure ought to. He said, I tell you what, I get back, I'm going to talk to my boss. So he went back to Atlanta, called me one day, and he said, send us we're going to advertise some leasing, and you can send us a bid. Well, you understand, they were on the national market. There were some big people that lived in Chicago and everywhere that was into leasing then, because it was a way to factor money. And I said, okay, good. Well, the way I did it, I didn't have a technical way. I'd figure out what a car would be worth in 4 years, ever how long he wanted it, and what it would sell for. And right now, and figure the depreciation. Not figure on, he wanted insurance in it, so I called out a little agent on the edge of town and asked him how much it'd be. I mean, it wasn't a very sophisticated way, but I got my bid in. It was on a nice piece of paper, like everybody else. But he called and he said, sorry, Pete, PH&H heard about this deal, and they in this big club in Chicago, and you didn't win the bid. All right? But I kept calling him. And every time I'd hear a joke, I'd call and tell him. I made friends with that guy. But they decided they wouldn't lease. The concept didn't fit them. A year went by. Kept calling. One day he called and he said, I think it might be a good time. Send me a quote. I did. And he called back and he said, well, order me 6. Order me 4 more. They wrote me up in a magazine. I was selling cars so fast at Tenneco Oil. And before they knew it, I had 60 automobiles out to them. And that was a big number right then. But anyway, eventually, Tenneco, the big boys, got hold of it on the national market, and they got to business. But by that time, I'd left up at Bill Henry Ford, and I was out of the leasing business. But it was a great time. But I was persistent. And I didn't have much to say to the guy, but good morning. But you can do that. You can smile at somebody you're going to get in the elevator with. You can see somebody in the hallway. You can do that, but you got to let them know you'd like to do business with them. And everybody else backed off, and that's where they had a better product. They backed off, but they didn't pull it off. We wound up selling that leasing company to Ford Motor Company. because we didn't borrow all the money we could to lease those cars. And that was my first stake. But they paid us good, and then they let us buy it back in. Anyway, from there, I decided I had an opportunity to go to Manny and be the Ford dealer. And the dealership there was almost closed, and I went down there, and that was my hometown, and that started a whole new life there. But again, I was by the seat of my britches. Got there, asked everybody in that town to buy a car from me. I'd go home at night with them. I'd eat food with them. I got to know them. And they didn't know them, I'd make like I knew them. And they knew something, and I wound up, had some very good competitors there. And Mr. Hanna liked the way when I went in to quit my job to go to Manny to be the Ford dealer, he said, I'm going with you. You gonna go with me? Yeah, all right. I had me another backer, a guy out of Roebling, but I said, okay, if you want to go, that's fine. So Billy went with me in business, and when he got down there, he found out that I'd work, and I was honest, and he backed me, and that's all I needed. And from there on, I started doing deals. Bought a Ford dealership in DeRidder. Wound up a few years later, we got one in Alexandria, got one in Mansfield, and I got a couple of more. I was kind of hid behind, but you weren't supposed to have contiguous parishes, and they had certain categories you had to fall into. But I really was active in the car business for a long time. In addition, we got into the radio business. I bought that, real estate business. We did some developing. Wound up in the water park business. Now that's called an Insolito debt. Y'all read your book. Don't try not to do an Insolito debt, but if you do, you look around the room because you might wind up with a water park. But I was on this note with these guys. They all had Mercedes and big fine cars, and I was told they could all carry their end of the deal. But I was wrong. And when the roll was called up yonder, I was the only one there. But we honored, I had to take that debt, finish that park, and built that, and that's now going strong in Shreveport, and ran it for many, many years. Mr. Hanna took the other, there was another venture, he took that, and he gave it all he had. And he paid his part, but we finished that. I finished that park out, and eventually bought Billy out of everything that we own in all these other ventures, and I become a sole owner of all these interests. Then I just continue to plow on and do deals. But I want to tell you something. It ain't all peaches to do deals. You got to know your homework, or you might wind up with a nightmare. It could cost you big money. And I want to tell you something. You make money buying. Your big money is when you buy a deal, you buy it right. It might save you enough to save you a lot of money down the road, and you can get pretty good cuts. But you know, one of the worst deals I ever got into, worst situation I ever got into, was I built this building in Manny. It was a Ford dealership, state-of-the-art building, and that's when interest rates first were in the tank, and they first started floating. Up to that time, 4.5% was what prime was. Hell, it went on up to 10%. Well, I went ahead and built, and I got in that building, and the interest rate floated on down, and the interest rate wound up being 7%. Okay, I can live with that. So then a few years later, I go off down here to Alexandria, and I started to build that building there where the dealer is now. And interest rates started floating. Yeah, I know how that works. It'll float back down. I went ahead and signed that note, $1.8 million. Interest rates started floating up. That year I won the state bid, and 600 cars to Ford. Interest rate kept floating up. It got up to 21.5% on $1.8 million. Now you think my performer one shot to hell, but somebody would walk in that building and they want to buy an automobile, they'd bought it. They didn't realize it, but they were going to buy it for me. All those years I drove back and forth from Manny, and I would go night and day back and forth. We didn't have an interstate, but I was scheming up everything in the way I could think of to sell cars. Some of y'all might remember this. I'd give away shotguns, crawfish cookers. Them coon asses in Marksville, they love them crawfish cookers. Four-wheelers. They'd come in here and sign up 48 months on a pickup truck and get through. Where's my crawfish cooker? But we did everything in the world. But we sold automobiles. And those 600 units I sold to the state that year, I'd call those jokers up at 21.5%, and that fella would tell me I'm going to process the invoice tomorrow. I said, and it cost me $5. You're going to do it today. But we got it all done. But finally one day, I was getting dressed and wondering what am I going to do. And I remembered Mr. Hanna had taken me up to Detroit a couple of times. And impressionable, good gracious. You go up there where Henry Ford was, and see all those people you'd see in print all the time, make all these national decisions, and to be around them, God, did they impress me. Being around the Dearborn Inn, tell you something funny, up there in the business office at Ford Motor Company, all the ashtrays were shiny. They were on the wall. And then that old building was over 100 years old. I wondered, why is that? And finally one of the old timers said, well, that's because Mr. Henry, he didn't believe in smoking. He didn't believe in depreciation. And so whenever they'd come in the end of the year, if they'd hit him with depreciation, he cut out smoking in the buildings. And that old snow, they had to go outside to smoke. And we just got cigarette ashtrays in here about the year before last. That's the reason they all shining. Henry died. Another funny thing, I was over at the Ford Hospital. They were pondering over building them, doing some improvements. Called up downtown to see what it was going to cost them in interest, and they ran a P&L on the Ford Hospital and found he had $10.5 million in the bank in a reserve they didn't even touch. Why? Because Mr. Henry, he don't believe in depreciation. He made those accountants, if they depreciated something, they had to put the money over here on the side, another account to offset it. He had to be sure we had it. And Mr. Henry had been dead 20 years, and that money had been there all that time. Funny things happen the way you look at business at the time you come along in life, but the main thing, they were solvent. And so anyway, I got to thinking about going to Detroit. So I went up here to Shreveport, bought me a ticket, took off to Detroit, got up there, and I got to shooting the breeze with an old boy. He wrote for the Detroit News, and I didn't know he was going to put everything I said in the paper. Next day it comes out, this Ford dealer from Manny, I sat on the plane with him yesterday going to Detroit, and he told me he wasn't going to be up here very long, that he was coming up here to see Ford Motor Company, but that, and I could tell he didn't like labor unions, and so he was just going to be in and out. He said, he asked me, why did I live in a place like this for? Fur. He said, fur. And he said, you know, when I got off that plane, I got to my car. It was in 5 feet of snow. I had to give 2 boys $10 a piece to dig my car out. I got to thinking about that Ford dealer from Manny. Why do I live in a place like this for? So it made me proud to be right here in the sunny South. But anyway, I went down there and I met this guy and I said, I got to get some relief. He said, sure you do. Oh, he was smart. He outfoxed me, I can tell you. But I outfoxed him a little bit too. But he gave me some relief. And he said, so what do you want? You want a better interest rate? Oh yes sir, 21.5%. Well, how would you like 18? He kept doing those arms. Oh, I like that. Anything better than 21.5. Okay, if I give you 18, I'll do that. Now you've got to give me something. If I give you something, you got to give me something. Helen heard me say that 100 times. But anyway, I said, what's that? He said, you got to give me a floor. Well, whatever you want. Well, 15%. All right. So he's saying, I'm saying it'll never drop below 15%. And he's saying 18 will be my high. Well, we made a deal. And that saved me a lot of money. I go back and interest rates dropped to 11%. But anyway, I followed through and I had fortitude not to give up. I kept trying. And again, I was operating by the seat of my pants, my britches. Life rocked along there a few years, and the most interesting thing happened. What a coincidence. The Blake family lived just up the street from me, and I'd see them every day. You could set your clock by them. They'd walk up the street at noon, they'd come back down. Mama would tell me about them, and boy, I got to know them, and I'd speak to them, and never thought I could wind up in the banking business. And so the JJ's daddy, one day I was talking to him, and I kind of threw out to him about banking, what I learned in the rooming house, and how I'd like to own one, and about what I thought a good bank would be worth. I asked for the business. And about a year later, he called me one day, and he said, "You mean what you said?" And I said, "I sure do. Let's talk." So he came out, brought JJ. JJ was a young boy just out of college. He didn't know this was the man. But anyway, we made a deal. And the first thing I did, I called up his buddy of mine in Mississippi, and I said, "I just signed a contract to buy a bank." "But how you buy a bank?" "By the seat of my britches." Remember I told you? He said, "Well, you got to get you a good lawyer and a good CPA." And I said, "All right, who do you use?" He told me. Went over there and we hired him. And so that started me in the banking business. I want to tell you something quickly though, before I forget the car business. To handle the word no is a devastating thing to handle. And I used to work on the theory that 3% of the people every day on this earth would buy an automobile. You just got to find them. So if you get on that telephone and call 20 people a day, you're liable to get 3 people that would say, "Yeah, you can demonstrate me one." And if you get 3 people going to demonstrate it, one of them going to buy. That's a lot of calls every day. But that's better than sitting on a showroom floor shooting a breeze. But to get a car salesman to make that call and ask somebody to buy and take the word no would drive them up the wall. And things got so tough one year, I locked them all in a room and gave them all a telephone and made them all call. But people were just nervous as they could be. But we sold a lot of cars. And that's the way it is in life. You got to ask for the business, but you got to handle that word no. But when I got in the banking business, it's been the most fascinating, fun thing I've ever done in my life. And we hired a guy to come in. They had a great record. He brought the bank into the new age. JJ's daddy was very conservative. I think we have 2 telephone lines, JJ? 2 telephone lines. And I guarantee if he made a loan, it was genuine. It was great. But so I knew it was no bad loans. But we started putting it together, and after about less than a year later, just needed Howard left, and JJ stepped up to be the president. And he was only 27 years old. I didn't know anything about banking, but I had confidence in him and his family. And my job is don't pretend you know something if you don't. You back the person that does. And that's what I've done all my life. All the businesses I've ever owned. Some of them I don't even understand. Some of them I don't even have the license to run. But you got to have you a good person, and you got to back that person and get the most out of them. And that's what you can remember in life is opportunities come your way. You listen to your boss, do what he says, or if you run the business, get the person that wants to run it, but back them. Be loyal. And it's amazing what everybody's talents can bring you. But JJ did a wonderful job. And what we did, of course, in my aggressive way, I began to acquire banks. And I think we went through about 7 different banks. These little communities, Pleasant Hill, Mansfield, Shreveport, Alexandria. We bought some banks. And at that time, it was publicized, so many of the banks were going down the tube. Owners were in jail, in trouble with the people. I didn't want to have any trouble, and I knew he'd keep us right. And that's what we enjoyed doing. And then a few years ago, we went into Arkansas, and our bank operated from Arkansas to Alexandria. We were happy to have met a bank like MidSouth. They're like us, good, conservative aggressive, community-oriented type bank. And they agreed, we made a deal. They honored all my commitments, and they honored the one in Northwestern. That's why you got that big sign on your football field out here. They honored to keep that, and I appreciate that. And I'm proud to say I wish we had all the banks up there. It's a big help to the whole program. But we're committed to this university, and they honored that, and I appreciate that. We now offer over 600 jobs. And people all feel inspired. Our banks go down to almost to New Orleans, over to Dallas, College Station, soon to be in Austin, Texas. But we got that common service. Call us. We'll come see you. We care about you. And we're not too busy to talk about any idea you got. My job is I serve on the boards, and I assist in any way they want me to. And we have a lot of meetings. But right today, like Troy, this bank don't mind jumping in the car and driving. Well, that's the way I always did. And he said he wanted to come up here today to be a part of this, and I appreciate that. I've since become involved in some nursing homes throughout Louisiana. I think that's going to be the coming thing. I'm beginning to where I'm going to have to pick me out of a room, I guess. Don't get any ideas, Doug. But but anyway, I'm involved in that, and I raise cattle, and I have a cattle farm, and I enjoy that, producing a good cow. And I enjoy looking for deals. And I stay involved with my high school. On Friday nights, you'll find me out there on the football field, and I'm carrying the chain. That's as close as I can get to the job, get to the game, and not get run over sometimes. But looking back, what is all this jabber this old guy is giving y'all? What does that mean? And I hope you'll remember a few things I'm going to tell you. And I'm going to end because you got some great speakers coming up. I'm proud to be in their company. But first of all, you got to be willing to work. If you're out there thinking you got a free ride, I'm sorry. And if you're ahead of somebody right now and that fellow's sitting behind you, it will work. He's going to pass you up. All they got, because there's a lot of people that need an opportunity, but you got to be committed to work. And you just can't afford to just not work. But you can have fun doing it. It's just how you look at life, you know. And you can have fun with your work. And it's with your attitude and with your personality. Not everybody bubbles so excited, but they can smile. They can say hello. And you know, you can do that. And if you'll do that consistently every day, you'll be surprised but what that'll mean. And if you happen to be an owner, back your people. I knew back in JJ, he had the work ethics. Just back him. But you back in everything I've been in, you back your people. And if you don't own a business and you're the employee, then follow your boss. Do what they say. And always control the money. I've seen so many of my friends get to going in business and they take the eye off the money and the checkbook. And then all of a sudden they got a screwed up deal. And the next thing I can tell you is be honest. Don't ever do anything to destroy your integrity. That takes years to straighten out. If you want to go to a bank and borrow money, you need to think about it a little bit. And you think about how you can convince that bank that you're going to pay them back. Now, it's a little bit different from my day. They can't make character loans. They got to be sure they get their money back. Well, you just be sure you can tell them how. And have you a plan, because that'll help you in the long run. I recognize that you people, y'all smarter than us. You smarter than me, guarantee you. Electronics, good. But y'all understand, y'all breathe that stuff. But I know what the rule of hard knocks is. I know about dreaming and staying awake at some nights wondering how I'm going to make a deal work. You put that work ethics with what you know, and there's no telling what you will accomplish. I want to tell you something else though. Every day you thank God that you're healthy. I have a little daughter who was in a car accident, the most talented person on this earth on graduation night. And nothing works on her but her eyes and her mind. And you get around people like that, it'll bring you down to your knees. And you thank God that you are healthy and you use your health to the betterment of your life. And also be respectful for those that's not. But you know, thinking of others, going to your knees in prayer, that's meant a lot to me in my life. Because we're not here by accident. And there is a God. And you know, realize that. And be respectful of it. It ain't just you. It's a lot of other things. And one more thing I want to tell you in closing, I think it's only fitting. It don't hurt you to be a little involved in politics. These people that say, I don't want to undo politics. Well, let me tell you what, somebody is. And that's kind of what we got right now in Washington. We got a mess. But you know, I learned something in the car business. Here's a little story that might be of interest. If my body were a car, this is the time I'd be thinking about trading it in for a newer model. I got bumps and dents and scratches, and my finish and my paint job is getting a little dull. But that's not the worst of it. My headlights are out of focus, and it's especially hard for me to see things up close. My traction is not as graceful as it once was. I slip and slide and skid and bump into things even in the best of weather. My white walls are stained with very close veins. It takes me hours to reach my maximum speed, and my fuel rate burns inefficiently. Here's the worst of it. Almost every time I sneeze, cough, or sputter, either my radiator leaks or my exhaust backfires. You guys are going to get older, I'm telling you. And 50 years will pass. It will pass. I used to be right where you are, and now it's just up here, but not anymore. You guys are going to find those years pass you by. Get ready. We're counting on you. I've used this business department several times for several projects. Y'all run performance for me. They've been right. And I appreciate so much the job this university does in the School of Business. They're nationally recognized. You're fortunate to be here. And you're in a great university. I want to thank you for being asked to speak today. You got some great speakers coming up, can do a lot better than me. But thank you very much.